We're really excited to be joined right now by Wasserman agent and, of course, the agent for Maxx Crosby, CJ LaBoy. CJ, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's get your thoughts on Maxx Crosby's deal. What is it about edge rushers right now that make them such a highly in-demand thing in the NFL right now that are getting paid?
Well, I think it's very simple, right? The guys that are getting the most amount of money in the NFL are the quarterbacks, and the edge rushers are the ones that have to bring them down or at least disrupt them. And I think, it's an interesting time for them and a very unique time too, because you have guys like Max and Miles and Micah and Trey and it's probably soon to be TJ Watt and Danielle Hunter, some of the best, if not the best in the entire NFL, all, up or extending their deals around the same time. So the shift was coming, and we're excited to be a part of it and happy to see it for all these guys. They're very deserving.
CJ, absolutely. And also for 4 whole days, Max held the record for having the highest non-quarterback paid deal. Great 4 days, passing Justin Jefferson that time. I'm curious, what was the process like in getting that extension for Maxx Crosby?
Yeah, it's actually a process that started, over a year prior. The Max has gone through there at the Raiders a couple of regime changes, as we know, with coaches and GMs. And I think the fortunate part, or one of the fortunate parts for Max, is that with every regime change, he's been rewarded. But about a year or so ago, we went to the team and, voiced our, not concerns, but our desire to have his contract adjusted, especially in light of how he's played and outplayed the prior extension that he did, which made him, I believe, the 4th highest paid edge rusher in the NFL at the time of signing. And there was a market shift. There's a shift in his play on the high side, and he was certainly deserving of it. And at the time, he had 3 years left on his deal. Really was unprecedented for the Raiders to do an extension at that time, but they did agree to adjusting his deal and giving him a big increase in salary and adding money into a year that they didn't really have to do, but they did it because of Max and who he is. Which we greatly appreciate. And as part of that, laying the foundation for where we were going to be this year. Now, a lot of stuff had to happen between then and now. And within that, there was another regime change with Antonio Pierce getting fired and, their general manager getting let go, Tom Telesco, who, I have a tremendous amount of respect for. So it put a lot of stuff up in the air, and then, as we all know and we all saw, there was a lot of trade talk and trade rumors, and Max was a part of it for literally every team in the league, it felt like. But it was a long process. Once it got to a place where Max, most importantly, felt really great about being a Raider, which he always has. He really has never questioned it. And then they made the executive hires that they did with Pete Carroll and John Spytek, who are phenomenal in my opinion. He was like, look, all in, let's see if we get something done. And at that point, then it kind of came together a little bit quickly, even though conceptually the foundations were all there. Once Mark and Tom and all those guys got involved, we were able to kind of come to agreement and, get a deal done for Max.
And one of the other players out there that's looking to make a big deal is Micah Parsons, obviously with the Dallas Cowboys, and he's obviously in negotiations with Jerry Jones, the owner there. CJ, I'd like to get your take on what Jerry Jones said about Micah Parsons' agent, basically not even remembering his name, but basically saying that the agent's job is not important here. Obviously, the agent took the high road here and said, look, we're looking for the best deal for Micah at the end of the day. But I'm curious just your take on that, on Jerry Jones saying that about that agent.
Yeah, I don't understand why that was said. That to me is, I don't know, a little unwarranted. I mean, Micah's agent is a phenomenal agent, David Mulugheta at Athletes First. He's a good friend of mine. He does a great job. And I know him and Micah are very close. Usually when you walk around the Super Bowl, it's me and Max and, David and Micah, and they're I know that they're in lockstep. So for Jerry Jones to say something like that about an agent of David's caliber, I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. But I think, look, the Cowboys have shown a recent history of tumultuous contract negotiations and the timing of them. I do think the organization does do a good job, and they've rewarded their players handsomely and tremendously, and oftentimes at the top of the market. But the comments I don't understand, and I know David and Micah will do a good job and, have a great result. I would expect him to be the highest paid defensive player in the league once that deal's done, whenever it does get done. Being a young guy, having his first, big bite at the apple, big apple. And I know David and Micah will get that figured out at some point.
Well,
but yeah, I don't know. I don't know why you'd say that. I know there's no way they don't know who David Mulugheta is. Zero chance.
Correct.
That was the hilarious part in all of this.
Yeah. It's David's a phenomenal agent, and he deserves his credit and deserves his flowers. But I don't know why an owner would say that. That was interesting, to say the least.
Yes, that comment definitely led to more questions than anything after Jerry Jones said that. But shifting gears, as we kicked off the month with the NFL's annual league meetings, as we know, that's the time that different move changes and different ideas and proposals come forward around what the league wants to change and implement for the next season. And one of those things that came out, that continues to come out, this is not new, is the discussion on the 18th game. Now, as of this moment, we keep seeing it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, with expectation around maybe 2027 that the league expands to 18 games with 2 buys and international games and other things they would implement. As an agent, when your players are looking at this, they're obviously the ones that are against this. The NFLPA has been openly against this. Owners, teams, the league's been for it. What have been your takeaways as to the excitement from your players, but then also as an agent, the opportunity that an 18th game could provide in terms of contract negotiations?
No, that's a great point. Look, at the end of the day, it's all about money, right? There's the reason why the NFL is expanding internationally is about money, right? Picking up new viewership, picking up new markets, picking up additional ad revenues and marketing partners, et cetera, internationally. Obviously a consumer base, broadening that consumer base. And as it pertains to the 18th game, it's the same thing. Right. I think, when talking to my players, it's kind of split, guys are for it because they see the value and what it can bring from additional revenues and as part of the rev share. And other guys are against it because, this is NFL football. It's a gladiator sport, right? Having another game is very taxing on these guys' bodies. I think it, like to your point, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. My hope is that when they do ultimately add an 18th game, that they look, very closely at the preseason and modify that, because I think personally preseason's a waste, and modifying the ramp up for these guys to get ready for any season, 17 or 18 games. But it's going to happen, it's inevitable, and it's all about money. That's all.
Well, so on that topic then, what percentage do you think players could get in terms of financial, benefits if they add an 18th game? Did you see a big percentage bump from the 17th game? Are we thinking maybe players are going to make another 5 to 10% here?
That's a good question. The formula is not as clear as one would think, right? The entire formula of all the money going into the pot that the NFL players are paid from isn't exactly a clear-cut science, right? But I would expect there to be a pretty decent sized bump. But it's not just from that adding that game from the ticket sales and all that. There's the ad revenues, there's the media buys. I mean, there's a multiplier that comes with just adding that one game. NFL football, from a viewership and media standpoint, reigns supreme. It's the number one watch programming period, at least in North America, let alone the world. So, there is a multiplier effect, and that multiplier will unequivocally help the player and help this player financial pool. So it'll be interesting to see what that actual bump is, but it will definitely be a bump.
Very interesting.
Yeah, indeed. Very busy off season as well. Always for an NFL agent, CJ LaBoy. Thank you so very much for joining us here at Front Office Sports.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me.